Chapter 1. The test in darkness. Castle did not breathe, but it watched. Elena had learned this in her first week serving house nocturne. The stone walls absorbed every footfall, every whispered prayer, every trembling exhale. The corridors stretched like arteries through a body that had died centuries ago but refused to rot. Candlelight flickered against portraits of pale faces with eyes too knowing, too hungry. She kept her gaze low when she passed them. She was the newest maid in a house that devoured the careless. 3 girls had vanished before her arrival. The housekeeper, Mrs. Voss, had explained their absence with practiced indifference, dismissed for incompetence, but Elena had found a blood stain beneath the library carpet, brown and ancient, and she understood. This was not a place that forgave mistakes. So she worked in silence. She scrubbed floors until her knuckles bled. She polished silver that would never see sunlight. She changed linens in rooms where the air tasted of old roses and older secrets. And she never ever entered the master's chambers uninvited, until tonight. Mrs. Voss had summoned her after midnight, her iron-gray hair pulled tight enough to stretch her papery skin. The master requires his chambers attended. You will go now. Elena's stomach had dropped. But he sleeps during the day. Why would he need? Do you question the needs of house nocturne? Mrs. Voss's voice could have cut glass. No, ma'am. Then go. Change the water in his basin. Refresh the night-blooming flowers. Do not wake him. Do not linger. Do not look upon him directly. The housekeeper's colorless eyes narrowed. And if he speaks to you, answer with courtesy and nothing more. Now Elena stood outside the master's door, her pulse hammering against her throat. The iron handle was cold as a grave. She pressed down slowly, wincing at the soft click of the latch. The door opened without sound. His chambers were vast and drowning in shadow. Heavy velvet curtains blocked every window, though there were no windows on this side of the castle, she realized with a chill. Candles burned in silver sconces, their flames motionless as painted fire. The air smelled of sandalwood and something metallic she didn't want to name. And in the center of the room, upon a bed carved from black wood and draped in crimson silk, lay the master of house nocturne, Lord Cassian Thorne. Elena had glimpsed him only once before, from across the great hall during a gathering of the household. He had stood at the head of a long table, surrounded by figures in dark finery, his presence commanding silence without effort. Tall, sharp-featured, impossibly still. His hair was black as ink, his skin pale as bone. When his gaze had swept across the assembled servants, Elena had felt it like a blade pressed to her throat. Now he lay as though dead. His hands were folded over his chest, long fingers laced together with unnatural precision. His face was a study in cold perfection, high cheekbones, a cruel mouth, softened only slightly in repose, dark lashes resting against marble skin. He wore a shirt of black linen, unbuttoned at the collar to reveal the hollow of his throat where a pulse should have beat. It didn't. Elena forced herself to move. She crossed to the wash basin on silent feet, poured out the old water, refilled it from the pitcher she'd carried. Her hands shook. Water sloshed over the rim. She froze, eyes darting to the bed. Lord Cassian did not stir. She exhaled slowly and turned to the flowers. Night-blooming jasmine, ghostly white and cloyingly sweet. She removed the wilted stems and arranged fresh ones, her movements mechanical. All the while her awareness stayed fixed on the figure behind her. He was too still. Not the stillness of sleep, but the stillness of stone, of death. Yet Mrs. Voss had said, "Do not wake him," which meant he could wake. Elena finished with the flowers and turned toward the door. 3 more steps and she'd be free. 3 steps and her foot caught the edge of the carpet. She stumbled, gasping, and her hand shot out to catch herself on the bedpost. Her palm slapped against wood with a sound like a thunderclap in the silence. She went rigid, terror flooding her veins. On the bed, Lord Cassian remained perfectly, impossibly still. Elena's breath came in shallow bursts. She waited for his eyes to open, for his hand to shoot out and seize her wrist, for cold fury to twist that perfect face. Nothing. She straightened slowly, heart galloping. He truly slept then, or whatever the dead did in place of sleep. She should leave, now, immediately. But something stopped her. A dark stain had appeared on his shirt, just below his ribs. Fresh blood, spreading slowly across the linen. Elena's nursing instincts, honed during 2 years caring for her dying mother, flared to life before caution could smother them. She moved closer, peering at the wound beneath the fabric. The shirt had been torn, she realized, clawed through. Whatever had injured him had struck with violence. He was bleeding. Bleeding and alone, and he's a vampire, her rational mind screamed. He would drain you without thought. Leave him. But her hands were already reaching for the basin. She dampened a clean cloth and returned to the bedside. Her fingers trembled as she gently lifted the edge of his shirt, exposing pale skin marred by 3 deep gashes. They weren't healing. Shouldn't a vampire heal? Elena pressed the cloth to the wounds, applying careful pressure. The blood was darker than human blood, nearly black in the candlelight. It soaked through the fabric immediately. She worked quickly, cleaning the injury, checking for debris. The gashes were clean, but deep. They needed binding. She glanced around and spotted a drawer in the bedside table. Inside, bandages, sealed vials of herbs, a silver knife. Of course he keeps medical supplies, she thought darkly. Probably for his victims. She pushed the thought away and focused. She'd done this 100 times for her mother. Her hands steadied as she wound the bandage around his torso, lifting him slightly to pass the cloth beneath his back. He was cold. Not ice cold, but cool as river stones. As she tied off the bandage, her fingers brushed against his chest. His eyes opened. Elena's breath stopped. They were silver. Not gray or pale blue, but genuine silver, like molten metal in the candlelight. They fixed on her with an intensity that pinned her in place, for a heartbeat. Neither moved. Then Lord Cashin's lips curved into something that might have been a smile on a less dangerous face. How curious, he murmured. His voice, low and dark as velvet, dragged through gravel. The little maid who tends the dying. Chapter 2. The serpent's bargain. Elena's heart stopped, then restarted with painful force. She jerked backward, but Lord Cashin's hand shot out faster than thought and caught her wrist. His grip was iron cold, unbreakable, yet careful as though he knew precisely how much pressure would snap bone and chose to withhold it. I didn't mean, her voice fractured. Mrs. Voss sent me to attend the room. You were bleeding. You saw a wounded predator and moved closer. His silver eyes studied her with unsettling focus, the kind of attention a scholar might give an unexpected specimen. Curious indeed. He sat up in one fluid motion, still holding her wrist. The bandage she'd wrapped was already darkening with fresh blood. This close, Elena could see details that shouldn't exist on a living face, skin to flawless, features to precisely arranged, an absence of small human imperfections. Please, she whispered. I meant no harm. No, he tilted his head, considering. You meant to help. Which demonstrates either extraordinary compassion or catastrophic stupidity. His thumb brushed across her racing pulse. Your heart betrays which you fear it might be. Elena forced herself to meet his gaze. If she was going to die here, she wouldn't die cowering. You were injured. I'm trained in wound care. I acted on instinct. Something flickered in those mercury eyes. Instinct. How delightfully mortal. He released her wrist and touched his bandaged ribs. Tell me, Elena Ashford. Yes. I know your name. What did you observe about this wound? The question caught her off guard. It wasn't healing. I thought vampires. She stopped, realizing her mistake. You thought vampires healed immediately? A dark smile touched his lips. Most do. Unless the weapon was blessed silver, or the attacker was another vampire of considerable age and power. He paused. Or unless the injured party was struck by one of his own blood-bound house in an act of betrayal. Elena's nursing training overrode her fear. The wound needs proper cleaning. Those bandages won't hold if you move. And you've lost blood. She stopped again, flushing. I don't know how that works for your kind. My kind? He repeated the words as if tasting poison. Then he stood, towering over her. Come. He moved toward a door she hadn't noticed, hidden in the dark paneling. Elena hesitated. Lord Cashin glanced back. You've already committed yourself, Miss Ashford. You've touched the blood of House Nocturne's master. You've seen me vulnerable. Do you imagine I can simply let you return to your quarters now? Ice flooded her veins. You're going to kill me. If I wanted you dead, you'd have been dead the moment you tripped on my carpet. He pushed open the door, revealing a private sitting room beyond. No, I'm going to determine what manner of spy you are, and who sent you. I'm not a spy. Then you're simply unlucky. He gestured impatiently. Inside, now. Elena's options narrowed to nothing. She stepped through the doorway. The sitting room was smaller than the bedchamber, but no less oppressive. Books lined every wall, their spines cracked with age. A fire burned in the hearth, cold fire, she realized with a start, blue-white flames that gave no heat. 2 chairs flanked a small table where a crystal decanter sat beside a single glass. Lord Cashin moved to the decanter and poured dark liquid that was definitely not wine. He drank it in one swallow, then closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they seemed more focused. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to a chair. Elena remained standing. "What happens now?" "Now you answer questions." He leaned against the mantel, studying her with that unnerving intensity. "You've been in my household for 2 weeks. In that time, you've kept to the servants' quarters, performed your duties without complaint, and made no attempt to explore restricted areas. Until tonight, I was ordered. Mrs. Voss has been with House Nocturne for 40 years. She knows better than to send untested servants to my private chambers." His voice dropped to something dangerous. "Which means either she's been compromised, or you have talents that convinced her you could be trusted with this task, or," Elena said, finding her courage, "she sent someone she wouldn't miss if things went badly." Lord Cashin's expression shifted slightly. Not quite a smile. Refreshingly honest. He moved to the second chair and sat with inhuman grace. "Very well. Let us speak plainly. House Mordain struck at me 3 nights ago during a peace negotiation. The wound you tended was meant to weaken me before their formal challenge arrives." He met her eyes. "They will come again, and they will kill everyone in this castle to reach me, servants included." Elena's blood ran cold. "Then we should flee. Warn the household and go where?" His laugh was bitter. "I am bound to this territory by blood, oath and ancient law. I cannot leave without surrendering my house, my power, and my life. And the household cannot leave because they are bound to me." He paused. "Except you." She blinked. "What? You've been here only 2 weeks. The binding ritual requires a full moon cycle to take hold. You are not yet chained to House Nocturne's fate." He leaned forward. "You can leave. Tonight, I will provide coin and a horse. You'll be in the next city by dawn." Elena stared at him. "Why would you help me?" "Because you dressed my wound when you could have fled. Because you showed kindness to something that doesn't deserve it." His silver eyes held hers. "Because I am tired of unnecessary death." The words hung in the cold air. Elena thought of the blood stain under the library carpet. The 3 girls who'd vanished. Her mother's final words. "Be brave, but be smart. Know when to run." This was that moment, but she heard herself say, "What if I stayed?" Lord Cashin went very still. "That would be catastrophically stupid. You said I wasn't yet bound. That means I can choose." She lifted her chin. "You need someone you can trust. Someone who isn't compromised. Someone mortal and fragile and utterly breakable. Someone who sees wounds and tries to heal them." Their gazes locked. Something shifted in the darkness between them. Finally, Lord Cashin rose. "If you stay, you remain in my chambers, under my protection and my watch. House Mordain has eyes everywhere. You'll be safest here." Elena's heart hammered. "That's improper." His smile was sharp as broken glass. "My dear Miss Ashford, you've just agreed to shelter with a vampire during a blood war. Propriety perished the moment you walked through my door." Chapter 3. The nature of Monster. Selena woke to the smell of jasmine and the certainty that she was being watched. She opened her eyes slowly, disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings. Dark velvet canopy above her. Silk sheets that whispered against her skin. For a confused moment, she thought she'd dreamed the entire night: the wound, the confrontation, the impossible bargain. Then she saw him. Lord Cashin sat in a chair by the window, motionless as a painting. The heavy curtains remained drawn, but pale light leaked through the gaps, painting thin lines across the carpet. He sat just beyond their reach, his body angled away from even that minimal exposure. "The sun rises," he said, without looking at her. "You should eat. There's bread and cheese on the side table. Water in the pitcher." Elena sat up slowly, clutching the sheets. She was still fully clothed. She'd refused to undress, and he'd provided a blanket without comment. Now she felt rumpled and vulnerable, while he looked as pristine as carved ice. "You didn't sleep," she observed. "I don't sleep as you do. I enter a state of dormancy, particularly during daylight hours." He gestured vaguely toward the windows. "The sun and I have a mutual understanding. It stays out there, and I don't burn to ash, despite everything." Elena felt a flicker of curiosity. "Does it hurt? Sunlight? Imagine your skin was made of paper, and someone held a candle to it continuously." His voice remained flat. "Yes, it hurts." She absorbed this. then rose carefully and moved to the side table. The bread was fresh, the cheese soft. Her stomach reminded her she hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. She ate standing, watching him from the corner of her eye. He hadn't moved, didn't appear to breathe, yet she sensed awareness in every line of his body. A predator's constant vigilance. "You're staring," he said mildly. "You're unsettling." Yes, he finally turned his head, silver eyes finding hers. "That's rather the point. Fear keeps mortals cautious. Caution keeps them alive. You said you were tired of unnecessary death. I am. Which is why I frighten you now, so you remember what I am when your foolish mortal compassion tries to make you forget." Elena set down her bread. "I haven't forgotten. You're a vampire. You drink blood. You're stronger and faster than any human. You've probably killed more people than I could count." She met his gaze steadily. "But you're also injured, alone, and betrayed by your own house. So perhaps we're both in positions we'd rather not be in." Something shifted in his expression to quick to name. "You speak boldly for someone in a predator's den. You said I was safe here. I said safest. There's a difference." He rose with fluid grace and moved to a cabinet, careful to avoid the sunlight. "Tell me, Miss Ashford, what does a village girl know of vampires before she enters their service?" "The usual stories. Monsters who steal children, demons who seduce maidens, creatures without souls who serve darkness. And do I seem soulless to you?" Elena considered him, truly looked. The ancient weariness in his eyes, the careful control of every gesture, the way he'd offered her escape when he could have simply commanded her silence. "No," she said quietly. "You seem tired." His hand paused on the cabinet door. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, "I am 347 years old. I have seen empires rise and crumble. I have watched everyone I once knew turn to dust. I have killed to survive, protected those under my care, and made choices that haunt me still." He removed a small vial of dark liquid. "Tired doesn't begin to encompass it." He returned to his chair and uncorked the vial, drinking it quickly. His wounds, Elena noticed, looked better than they had last night. "Not healed but improving. Is that blood?" she asked. "Preserved and mixed with herbs that slow the hunger. It's not satisfying, but it sustains." He met her eyes. "I haven't fed from a living source in 30 years. Elena blinked. "But I thought vampires needed fresh blood? Living essence? The terror that seasons the feast?" His voice turned bitter. "We do. It makes us stronger, faster, more powerful. But power has a cost, Miss Ashford. It changes us. Makes us see mortals as resources rather than people. I decided long ago that I'd rather be weak than become the monster my nature demands." The confession hung in the air between them. "That's why you're injured," Elena realized. "You're not at full strength. You couldn't heal quickly because you haven't fed properly in decades." "Yes." He leaned back, studying her. "House Mordain knows this. It's why they struck now. They believe me weakened, vulnerable, and they're correct." "Then why not?" She stopped, understanding. "You'd rather die than become what you fear, wouldn't you?" Elena thought of her mother's final days, the pain, the slow dissolution of everything that made her who she was. She'd begged Elena to end it, but Elena couldn't, wouldn't. Some lines couldn't be uncrossed. "Yes," she whispered. Lord Cashin's expression softened fractionally. "Then perhaps you understand more than I credited." A bell chimed somewhere in the castle's depths. His posture shifted instantly, alert, tense. "What is it?" Elena asked. "The midday bell. Mrs. Voss will bring a meal tray soon. She cannot see you here." He stood. "There's a door behind the bookshelf. It leads to a washing chamber. Go there and remain silent until I come for you." Why can't she know? Because I don't yet know if she's compromised. Because if House Mordain learns I've taken a mortal under my protection, they'll use you against me. His eyes blazed. Because I will not have your death on my conscience. "Now go." Elena went. Behind the bookshelf, she found a small chamber with a copper tub and basin. She pressed her ear to the door, and heard footsteps, muffled voices, Mrs. Voss's sharp tones, Lord Cashin's measured responses, then silence. Minutes stretched. Elena's legs cramped. Finally, the door opened. Lord Cashin stood there, his face grim. "She's gone." "But she asked questions about the blood on my sheets." He met Elena's eyes. "Someone is watching very carefully, and they know something has changed." Chapter 4. Small Mercius Day passed in strange, suspended silence. Elena discovered that time moved differently in a vampire's chambers. Without sunlight to mark the hours, without household duties to structure her day, she felt unmoored. She read from Lord Cashin's books, histories mostly, written in languages she barely understood. He sat across from her, sometimes still as death, sometimes writing in a leather journal, with movements too quick to follow. They didn't speak much. But the silence wasn't uncomfortable. As afternoon shadows lengthened beyond the curtains, Lord Cashin finally stirred. You'll need proper clothes if you're to remain here. Those servants' garments will raise questions if anyone sees you. Elena glanced down at her plain gray dress. I have nothing else. There are trunks in the storage room. Gowns from… He paused, something flickering across his face. From before. They should fit well enough. Whose were they? His jaw tightened. Someone who left long ago. The weight in his voice told her not to press further. I can alter them if needed. My mother taught me to sew. Your mother. He set down his journal. Tell me about her. The request surprised her. Why? Because I'm trying to understand why a girl who watched her mother die would walk willingly into a house of death. His silver eyes found hers. And because these rooms are very quiet, and I find I prefer your voice to the silence. Elena's throat tightened. No one had asked about her mother in months. After the funeral, the village had moved on, as villages did. Her grief had been private, buried under survival. She was kind, Elena said softly. Even when the illness took everything else, she was kind. She'd been a healer before, midwife, herbalist. People came from 3 towns over for her remedies. She traced the edge of her book. The wasting sickness took 2 years to kill her. By the end, she couldn't remember my name. But she'd smile when I held her hand, and when she died, you had nothing left. I had debts, medical expenses. The cottage went to pay them. Elena's voice steadied. House Nocturne offered wages and room. It seemed better than starving. Or you could have remarried. A young woman with nursing skills. No, the word came out sharper than intended. I tried that once. He was handsome and charming, and promised everything. Her hand unconsciously touched her left wrist, where a faint scar marked the skin. He broke my wrist when I questioned his gambling debts. I left before he could break worse. Lord Cashin's expression darkened. His name. It doesn't matter now. It matters to me. The intensity in his voice made her look up. His eyes had shifted, not quite silver anymore, but something deeper, hungrier. Why? She whispered. He seemed to catch himself, and the hunger receded behind cold control. Because I despise men who harm those weaker than themselves. And because you deserved better than what this world gave you. He stood abruptly. I'll fetch those gowns. He left through a side door before she could respond. Elena sat in the sudden solitude, her heart racing. That brief flash of fury in his eyes, it hadn't been directed at her. It had been for her, protective, almost possessive, dangerous territory. When he returned, he carried an armful of silk and velvet. These should serve. There's a screen in the corner if you require privacy. Elena took the gowns, her fingers sinking into fabric finer than anything she'd owned. Deep emerald, midnight blue, wine red. These are beautiful. They were meant to be. He turned away, giving her space. Change. I'll avert my eyes. Behind the screen, Elena undressed quickly and selected the emerald gown. It fit remarkably well. Perhaps the previous owner had been her size. She emerged self-consciously. Lord Cashin's gaze traveled over her once, assessing. Better. You look less like prey now. Is that a compliment? It's a tactical observation, but something in his expression softened. Though green suits you, it makes your eyes less brown and more amber. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. You notice such things? I've had 3 centuries to learn how to see. He gestured to a side table where he'd set a tray. Dinner, Mrs. Voss left it outside. I retrieved it after she departed. The meal was simple: roasted chicken, bread, vegetables, but it smelled divine. Elena realized she'd eaten nothing since the morning bread. She sat and began eating, while Lord Cashin returned to his chair. You don't eat food at all? She asked between bites. I can. It tastes like ash and provides no nourishment, but I can. He watched her eat with an expression she couldn't decipher. I used to enjoy it. Wine, especially. Now it's merely a memory of being human. Do you miss it? Being human? He was quiet for a long moment. I miss the sun. I miss aging, growing, changing. I miss the urgency that mortality provides. His voice dropped. I miss believing that tomorrow might be different from today. Elena set down her fork. But you're still here. You didn't surrender to House Mordain. You haven't given up, Haven't I? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I've spent 30 years withdrawing from what I am, weakening myself with preservation vials instead of proper feeding, isolating myself from even my own house. Perhaps surrender would simply be efficient. No, Elena surprised herself with her vehemence. You saved me last night. You offered me escape. You're protecting your household even now. Those aren't the actions of someone who's given up. They're the actions of someone delaying the inevitable, or someone who still has hope, even if he won't admit it. Their eyes met across the candlelight. For a heartbeat, Elena saw past the cold control, past the ancient weariness, to something raw and desperate underneath. Hope, Lord Cashin repeated, as if testing the word's weight. What a dangerous thing to offer a creature like me. What a human thing to offer anyone, Elena countered. He almost smiled. Almost. Then bells shattered the moment, not the gentle chimes of earlier, but harsh, clanging alarm bells that echoed through the castle's bones. Lord Cashin was on his feet instantly. Every trace of vulnerability vanished. They're here. Who House Mordain? His voice turned to ice. Stay in this room. Bar the door behind me. Do not open it for anyone except me. He moved toward the chamber door, then paused and looked back at her. Thank you, he said quietly, for the hope. Then he was gone. Chapter 5. Blood and silver. Elena's hands shook as she dragged the heavy bar across the door. The alarm bells continued their violent clamor, punctuated now by shouts and the crash of breaking glass. She pressed her ear to the wood, trying to make sense of the chaos beyond. Footsteps thundered past. Steel rang against steel, and underneath it all, sounds that couldn't be human. Inhuman shrieks, guttural snarls, the wet tearing of flesh. They're killing the servants. The thought seized her with horror. Mrs. Voss, for all her coldness, didn't deserve to die. The kitchen girls who'd shared nervous glances with Elena in the corridors. The old groundskeeper who'd nodded at her kindly. Elena backed away from the door, her mind racing. Lord Cashin had told her to stay, to hide, to survive, but she'd watched her mother waste away while feeling helpless. She'd fled her husband's violence instead of fighting back. She'd spent 2 years letting fear dictate her choices. Not tonight. She scanned the room frantically. No weapons. Nothing but books and furniture, and her eyes caught on the silver knife she'd seen in Lord Cashin's bedside drawer. The one kept with the medical supplies. Elena ran to the drawer and seized it. The blade was short, meant for precision rather than combat, but it was pure silver. She'd felt its weight, its quality. Against vampires, silver was the only mortal advantage. She returned to the door and lifted the bar as quietly as possible. The corridor beyond was chaos incarnate. Bodies littered the floor, servants in gray, their throats torn open, their eyes wide with final terror. Blood painted the walls in arterial sprays. And moving through it all, like death given form, were the vampires of House Mordain. Elena counted 5, though more might lurk in the shadows. They wore dark leather and moved with predatory grace, their eyes gleaming red in the candlelight. One was feeding on a kitchen maid who'd stopped screaming. Another stalked toward the great hall, where the sounds of battle raged loudest. None looked in Elena's direction. She slipped into the corridor, pressing herself against the wall. The silver knife felt pathetically small in her hand, but she'd learned anatomy caring for her mother. She knew where arteries ran, where organs sat vulnerable beneath skin. If she could reach the great hall, perhaps she could help. Perhaps a hand clamped over her mouth from behind. Elena's scream died against cold fingers as she was dragged backward into an alcove. She thrashed, raising the knife, but a familiar voice hissed in her ear. Stop, it's me. Lord Cashin released her and spun her to face him. His shirt was torn, fresh blood, not his own, splattered across his chest. His silver eyes blazed with fury. I told you to stay in the chambers, he said. His voice, lethal and low. People are dying, yes, and you'll join them if you continue this idiocy. He glanced at the knife in her hand, and something flickered across his face. Where did you get that? Your drawer. I thought you thought to fight vampires with a medical scalpel? Despite the dire circumstances, his tone held a note of incredulous disbelief. You're either remarkably brave or remarkably stupid. I couldn't just hide while a vampire rounded the corner, moving fast. Lord Cashin shoved Elena behind him and met the attacker with brutal efficiency. They collided in a blur of motion, too quick to follow. Cashin's hand closed around the vampire's throat, lifting him off the ground. Lord Mordain sends his regards. The vampire choked out, grinning through blood-stained teeth. He says your house ends tonight, Thorn. and every soul in it. Cashin's other hand struck like a serpent, tearing into the vampire's chest. There was a wet crack, and the vampire's eyes went wide. Cashin pulled back, holding something that pulsed with dark light. The vampire crumbled to ash. Elena stared at the dissipating remains, then at what Lord Cashin held. A heart. He'd torn out the vampire's heart. He let it fall, and it turned to dust before hitting the floor. Effective, he said coldly, but exhausting. I can't sustain this for long. He looked at Elena. How many did you see? She forced her mind to work past the horror. 5. Maybe more. There are 8 in total. I've killed 3. He wiped blood from his face with the back of his hand. House Mordain brought their second and third tier fighters. Lord Mordain himself isn't here. He's too cowardly to risk direct confrontation until I'm weakened further. Your household. The vampires of my house are fighting in the East Wing. Mrs. Voss has barricaded the surviving servants in the kitchens, his jaw clenched. But Mordain's forces are pushing toward them. If they break through, then we stop them. Elena tightened her grip on the silver knife. Tell me what to do. Lord Cashin studied her for a heartbeat, and something shifted in his expression, a flicker of the hope she'd offered him earlier. Tempered by grim reality, vampires are fast and strong, but we have weaknesses. Silver burns us, slows our healing. Decapitation or heart destruction kills us permanently. He gestured toward the Great Hall. If I engage them directly, you stay in the shadows. If one separates from the group, if you have a clear strike at the heart or throat, take it. But do not hesitate. Hesitation kills. I won't hesitate. Good. He moved toward the hall, then paused. Elena, when this is over, assuming we survive, remind me to be properly furious with you for disobeying. Despite everything, she almost smiled. When this is over, assuming we survive, I'll remind you that I helped save your household. Bold words from a woman with a scalpel. Bold actions from a vampire who hasn't fed in 30 years. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Partnership, perhaps. Trust forged in blood and necessity. Then they moved together into the killing floor of the Great Hall. The battle was savage poetry written in violence. 4 vampires from House Mordain fought 3 from House Nocturne in the center of the hall, their movements inhuman blurs. Furniture lay shattered. Tapestries burned. The ancient portraits watched with painted eyes as their masters fought for survival. Lord Cashin entered the fray like a dark angel, and the balance shifted immediately. Elena kept to the shadows as instructed, watching, waiting for her moment. She saw how the vampires moved, reading their attacks, anticipating their strikes. Saw how Lord Cashin's speed had diminished, how he couldn't quite match the others' fluidity. He was weakening. One of Mordain's vampires broke away, circling toward the shadows where Elena hid, toward the kitchens, toward the servants. Elena stepped into his path, silver knife raised, and met his crimson eyes with determination born of necessity. Hello, she said quietly. Let's talk about hesitation. Chapter 6. The weight of centuries. The vampire laughed, a sound like breaking bones. A mortal? He moved closer, circling her with predatory ease. Mordain said Thorn had grown soft, but this is pathetic. Hiding behind human cattle, Elena kept the knife steady, tracking his movement. I'm not hiding. I'm standing between you and the kitchens. How noble. His eyes gleamed crimson. And how futile. He lunged. Elena didn't think she acted. Her mother's lessons in anatomy guided her hand as she sidestepped and drove the silver blade upward, aiming for the space between ribs where the heart pulsed. The vampire was faster. His hand caught her wrist mid-strike, squeezing until bones ground together. Elena gasped in pain, but didn't drop the knife. Spirited, he hissed, pulling her close. I'll enjoy. Lord Cashin materialized behind him like a shadow given form. His hand punched through the vampire's back and emerged from his chest, clutching the still beating heart. The vampire's eyes went wide. His grip on Elena released. You'll enjoy nothing, Cashin said coldly, and crushed the heart to pulp. The vampire crumbled to ash. Elena stumbled backward, cradling her injured wrist. Lord Cashin caught her before she fell, his blood-soaked hands surprisingly gentle. Foolish, he murmured, but his voice held something other than anger. Brave and foolish. Did it work? Elena managed through the pain. You distracted him. Gave me the opening I needed. His thumb brushed carefully over her swelling wrist. Broken, but clean. It will heal. Behind them, the battle continued. 2 of House Nocturne's vampires had fallen. Only one remained, fighting alongside Cashin's depleted strength against 3 Mordain attackers. We're losing, Elena whispered. Yes, Lord Cashin's jaw clenched. I'm too weak. 30 years of self-imposed starvation. And now it costs me everything. Then stop starving. Elena met his silver eyes. Feed. He went very still. What? You said fresh blood makes you stronger. That it heals you. She straightened, despite the pain in her wrist. Take mine. Absolutely not. Why? Because it might change you? Make you more of what you fear? She grabbed his shirt with her good hand. What good is moral purity if everyone dies because of it? Your people are dying right now, Cashin. Let me help. You don't understand what you're offering. I understand that I'm choosing this. That's what matters, isn't it? You said you haven't fed from a living source in 30 years because you refuse to take without consent. Her voice dropped. I'm giving you consent. A Mordain vampire broke away from the main battle, rushing toward them. Lord Cashin shoved Elena behind him, intercepting the attack with brutal force. They grappled evenly matched, but Cashin was slower, weaker. The Mordain vampire's hand closed around Cashin's throat, Thorn's legendary control. The vampire sneered. So admirable, so weak. You've made yourself prey, and now you'll. Elena drove her silver knife into the vampire's exposed side. It wasn't deep enough to kill, but the silver burned like acid. The vampire shrieked and released Cashin, turning on Elena with murderous fury. Lord Cashin didn't hesitate. His hand shot out, seizing the vampire's head and twisting with savage strength. The crack echoed through the hall. The body fell, already turning to ash. Cashin stood over the remains, breathing hard, the first sign of true exertion Elena had seen from him. His wounds were bleeding again. His silver eyes had dimmed. Two left, he said roughly. And I'm nearly finished. Elena stepped closer. Then drink. Elena, you told me you were tired of unnecessary death. Don't let pride kill your people. She offered her unbandaged wrist. Please, trust me the way I've trusted you. His eyes locked on her wrist, on the pulse beating beneath pale skin. The hunger that flashed across his face was raw and primal and terrifying. But underneath it, she saw the man who'd offered her escape, who'd been protecting his household despite his weakness, who'd spent 30 years fighting his own nature. If I start, he said hoarsely, I may not be able to stop. Yes, you will, because that's who you are. Elena moved closer until she stood within his reach. You're 347 years old. You've made impossible choices for centuries. You can make this one too. Behind them, glass shattered. The remaining House Nocturne vampire fell, overwhelmed. The two Mordain vampires turned toward Cashin and Elena, grinning with blood-stained mouths. Time's up, one called. Surrender now, Thorn, and we'll make it quick. Lord Cashin's hand closed gently around Elena's offered wrist. His thumb found her pulse, and his eyes closed briefly. Forgive me, he whispered. Then his fangs pierced her skin. The sensation was nothing like Elena expected. No pain, instead, a rush of warmth that spread from the wound through her entire body. She felt his hunger, ancient and vast as an ocean, but controlled with iron will. Felt the connection forming between them, blood calling to blood, and she felt his power returning, his wounds sealed, his posture straightened. The silver in his eyes blazed like stars. When he pulled away, after mere seconds, his face had transformed. No longer the weary, wounded creature she'd tended. This was Lord Cashin Thorn at his full strength, beautiful and terrible and absolutely deadly. He turned to face the approaching vampires, and they stopped mid-stride. Gentlemen, Cashin said, his voice resonating with renewed power. Let me explain something about blood oaths and ancient laws. He smiled, and it was full of dark promise. House Nocturne was founded 400 years ago by my sire, who bound it with her own blood. When she passed her power to me, I became not just its master, but its living heart. He stepped forward, and the Mordain vampires actually backed away. Every vampire sworn to this house is bound to me through blood. Every stone in this castle knows my name. Every shadow answers to my call. His eyes blazed. And when I truly feed, I don't just restore my strength. I awaken everything this house was meant to be. The shadows in the hall began to move, not cast by candlelight, but moving independently, writhing like living things. They stretched toward the Mordain vampires, who stared in dawning horror. Tell Lord Mordain, Cashin said softly. That House Nocturne remembers its teeth. The shadows struck like serpents. The Mordain vampires screamed. Chapter 7. Shadows and sacrifice. The screaming didn't last long. Elena watched, transfixed and horrified, as the shadows consumed House Mordane's vampires like living darkness devouring light. They tried to fight, tried to flee, but the shadows were everywhere, wrapping around limbs, sliding down throats, tearing through immortal flesh with impossible ease. When it ended, only ash remained. Lord Cashin stood in the center of the destruction, his chest heaving, eyes still blazing with otherworldly power. The shadows retreated slowly, reluctantly, sinking back into corners and crevices as if awaiting his next command. Then his gaze found Elena, and something in his expression cracked. Are you hurt? His voice was raw. Beyond the wrist? Elena shook her head, unable to speak. She'd seen him kill before, quick, efficient, brutal. But this was something else entirely. This was power that made the air taste of copper and ancient stone. He crossed to her in 3 swift strides and caught her as her legs gave out. The adrenaline was draining, leaving her shaking and cold. I have you, he murmured, lowering them both to the floor. You're safe. It's over. Is it? Elena's voice came out thin. You said Lord Mordane wasn't here. Won't he? He'll think twice before attacking again. Cashin examined her wrist carefully, his touch feather light despite the power still humming through him. When word reaches him that I've regained my strength, that House Nocturne's blood magic has awakened, he'll retreat. For now, blood magic. Elena stared at the shadows still writhing faintly in the corners. You never mentioned because I haven't used it in 3 decades. His jaw clenched. Blood magic requires feeding. Real feeding. The more powerful the source, the stronger the magic. When I stopped drinking from living hosts, the shadows went dormant. Elena's eyes widened. My blood did that? Your freely given blood. He met her gaze, and the vulnerability in his eyes stole her breath. Consent matters, Elena, not just ethically, but metaphysically. Blood taken by force contains fear, anguish. It nourishes but doesn't empower. Blood given willingly. He touched the fading marks on her wrist. It carries trust, hope, humanity, things I'd forgotten how to access. Footsteps echoed from the corridor. Lord Cashin rose instantly, positioning himself between Elena and the doorway. But it was Mrs. Voss who appeared, her iron gray hair disheveled, her dress splattered with blood. My lord, she surveyed the ash-covered hall with clinical efficiency. The kitchens are secure. We lost 7 servants. The remaining household is accounted for. Her sharp eyes found Elena, including, it seems, Miss Ashford. Miss Ashford is under my direct protection, Cashin said, his tone brooking no argument. She saved multiple lives tonight, including mine, Mrs. Voss's expression revealed nothing. Very good, my lord. Shall I prepare chambers for her, or? She let the question hang deliberately. She remains in my quarters. Her safety is paramount. Something flickered in the housekeeper's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or concern. But she only nodded. As you wish. I'll see to the wounded and arrange for the disposal. She gestured at the ash. When she'd gone, Elena struggled to her feet. The hall spun slightly, and Cashin steadied her again. You've lost blood, he said quietly. You need rest, food, water. I need answers first. Elena pulled away, though it cost her. What you did the shadows, is that what all ancient vampires can do? No, each bloodline manifests differently. House Mordane breeds fighters' strength and speed beyond normal vampires. House Sable controls minds. House Corvus commands storms. He moved to right an overturned chair, his movements careful, controlled. House Nocturne was gifted with shadow magic by my sire. She was extraordinary, powerful beyond measure. When she passed her authority to me, I inherited the potential. But I locked it away because power corrupts, Elena finished. Because you were afraid of becoming the monster. Yes, he turned to face her fully. And now I've unleashed it again. Used it to kill, to terrify, to remind the other houses why Nocturne was once feared. His voice dropped. I've become exactly what I swore I wouldn't. Elena studied him, really looked. The blood staining his clothes, yes. The inhuman power still crackling faintly around him, yes. But also the shame in his posture, the self-recrimination in his eyes, the careful distance he maintained between them. You saved your household, she said firmly. You protected the innocent. You used power when it was necessary, not for pleasure or dominance. She stepped closer, despite her exhaustion. That's not corruption, Cashin. That's responsibility. You don't understand. I understand that you're punishing yourself for surviving. for being effective, for not being weak enough to die nobly. She touched his arm, feeling him flinch. But your people need you strong. I needed you strong tonight. And yes, maybe power is dangerous. Maybe it could corrupt you if you let it. But you have something most vampires don't. What's that? Someone who'll tell you when you're being an idiot. He stared at her, then laughed a genuine, surprised sound. Is that your role now? My conscience? If necessary. Elena swayed slightly, and his hands immediately steadied her. Though right now, my role is apparently person who needs to sit down before she falls down. Cashin swept her up without warning, cradling her against his chest. Then let me assist. He carried her through corridors still reeking of battle, past servants emerging cautiously from their hiding places. Upstairs, Elena's tired mind couldn't track. By the time they reached his chambers, her eyes were closing. He laid her on the bed, his bed. She realized distantly and drew blankets over her. Rest, he murmured. I'll stand watch. You need rest too, Elena mumbled. I'll enter dormancy soon. But first, I must ensure you're safe. His cool hand brushed hair from her forehead. Thank you, Elena, for your trust, for your courage, for reminding me that power can serve something other than fear. She wanted to respond, but exhaustion dragged her under like a tide. Her last conscious thought was of silver eyes watching over her, and shadows keeping vigil in the corners, no longer terrifying, but protective. Guard dogs made of darkness, commanded by a vampire learning to hope again. Chapter 8. The space between Elena woke to silence and the weight of consequences. Afternoon light pressed against the heavy curtains, thin and gray. Her wrist throbbed dully where it had been broken, now splendid and wrapped in clean linen. Someone Cashin, she assumed, had tended it while she slept. She sat up slowly, testing her body's limits. Exhausted but whole. The emerald gown was ruined with blood and ash, but someone had left a fresh one draped across a chair. Deep blue this time, with silver embroidery at the collar. Lord Cashin sat by the cold fireplace, so motionless he might have been carved from stone. But his eyes tracked her movement, alert despite the daylight hours. You should still be resting, he said quietly. So should you. Elena pushed back the blankets. Have you entered dormancy at all? No, he looked away. I've been thinking. The weight in his voice made her pause. About what happened? About what I did? What I became? His hands tightened on the chair's arms. I told myself for 30 years that I was different, controlled, that I'd risen above the violence inherent in my nature. He laughed bitterly. One taste of blood, and I summoned shadows to tear vampires apart. So much for transcendence. Elena crossed to him carefully, mindful of her injuries. You were protecting your household. I was enjoying it. The confession came out rough. When the power flooded back, when the shadows answered my call, it felt magnificent, intoxicating. I wanted to destroy them, not just stop them, but make them suffer for daring to threaten what was mine. He finally met her eyes, and the anguish there was raw. Do you understand, Elena? I wanted it. The violence, the dominance, the fear in their eyes. Every dark impulse I'd buried came roaring back the moment I tasted your blood. Elena absorbed this, choosing her words carefully. And yet you stopped. You didn't lose control. You didn't hurt me, only because you gave freely. If you'd been unwilling, if I'd had to take by force, he stood abruptly, pacing like a caged animal. I felt how thin that line was, how easy it would be to cross it. One moment of weakness, and I could have drained you dry without even realizing. But you didn't, this time. He turned to face her, his expression stark. What about next time? Or the time after? How long before the monster wins? Elena understood then. This wasn't just guilt, it was fear. Fear of himself, of what he could become. Then we make rules, she said firmly. Boundaries. You feed only when necessary, only with consent, and I or someone else monitors you, keeps you accountable. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's work. Constant, difficult work. She moved closer despite the warning in his eyes. But you've been doing that work alone for 3 decades. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you need someone to share the burden with, and you think you're that someone? His voice held an edge. A mortal woman with a broken wrist, and no understanding of what immortality does to the soul. I think I'm someone who sees you clearly and hasn't run away yet. Elena held his gaze. I think you're terrified that I will, that everyone will, once they see what you're capable of. So you push first, before they can leave. Cashin went very still. You have no idea what you're talking about, don't I? She gestured around the chambers. These gowns you gave me. You said they belonged to someone who left. But they didn't just leave, did they? You drove them away because you were afraid of exactly this, of caring and losing control. His jaw clenched. Her name was Isabel. She was human, kind, and foolish enough to believe I could be something other than a predator. His voice turned hollow. I proved her wrong. The blood bond grew too strong, and one night I nearly killed her. She barely escaped with her life. How long ago? 43 years. Elena's heart ached for the pain in his voice, pain that 4 decades hadn't dulled. And you've punished yourself ever since. Starved yourself, isolated yourself, convinced yourself you were protecting others, when really you were just hiding. Yes, the admission came out broken. Because hiding was safer than risking it again. Safer for who? Elena asked gently. The people who need you. Your household? Or just safer for your guilt? Cashin stared at her, something crumbling in his expression. You're cruel, you know that? I'm honest. There's a difference. She took a breath. Look, I don't know what happens next. I don't know if this whatever this is between us can work. But I know hiding from your nature isn't working either. You nearly lost everything last night. Because you were too weak to fight. I was weak because I refused to be a monster. No, you were weak because you thought those were the only 2 options. Elena moved closer. Until only a foot separated them. But there's a third option, Cashin. Being powerful and choosing to wield that power responsibly. Being a vampire and choosing to be a good one. It's harder than abstinence. It requires trust, boundaries, accountability. But it's possible. You can't know that. Neither can you. Not unless you try. She offered her unbandaged hand. I'm not Isabel. I'm not running away at the first sign of your nature. I'm standing here, knowing what you are. Knowing what you're capable of. And I'm telling you, we can figure this out together. Cashin looked at her hand like it was salvation and damnation offered on the same palm. You should leave, he said hoarsely, while you still can. Before this gets more complicated. It's already complicated. Elena's hand remained steady. And I'm not leaving. For a long moment, neither moved. The space between them felt vast as centuries and thin as paper. Then Cashin took her hand. His fingers were cool, gentle despite their strength. He held her hand like something precious and breakable, and the vulnerability in that simple touch undid something in Elena's chest. I don't deserve this, he whispered. Your faith, your trust, probably not. She smiled slightly. But you're stuck with it anyway. Something almost like hope flickered in his silver eyes. You're absolutely certain you're not an idiot? Completely certain I am one. But I'm your idiot now apparently. He huffed a sound that might have been a laugh. Heaven help us both. Outside, bells told the hour. Evening approached, and with it, the knowledge that House Mordain would regroup. That this was only a reprieve, not a resolution. But for now, in the quiet space between battle and whatever came next, Elena and Cashin stood together, hands clasped. 2 broken people choosing to trust despite every reason not to. It felt like the most dangerous thing either had ever done. It felt like the beginning of something worth fighting for. Chapter 9. Lessons in the dark. 3 nights passed in careful equilibrium. House Mordain had withdrawn, licking their wounds and plotting their next move. Lord Cashin used the reprieve to fortify defenses, strengthen blood wards around the castle's perimeter, and tend to his decimated household. 7 servants dead, 2 vampires of House Nocturne lost. The toll weighed heavily, but in the quiet hours between dusk and dawn, when the household settled into an easy rest, Cashin and Elena found themselves existing in a strange new rhythm. Tonight, she sat across from him in his study, a book of vampire law open between them. Her wrist had healed remarkably fast. Cashin claimed his blood carried healing properties that had transferred during feeding. She tried not to think too hard about that. The Covenant of Houses was established in 1-7, Cashin explained, his finger tracing elegant script across yellowed pages. After centuries of vampire wars nearly exposed our existence to humanity, the 5 founding houses agreed to territorial boundaries, dispute arbitration, and strict rules about mortal interaction. Elena leaned forward, fascinated, despite the dry material. What kind of rules? No mass killings that draw attention. No turning humans without permission from their regional house. No feeding in public. No using mind control for political manipulation. He flipped the page. Violations are punished by the Night Council representatives from each house who meet quarterly to address grievances. so there's actually vampire law enforcement, of a sort. Though enforcement often means execution, his expression darkened. House Mordain has violated the covenant repeatedly. They kill indiscriminately, turn humans against their will, use their fighters to intimidate smaller houses. But they're powerful, so the council looks the other way. That's not justice. No, it's politics. Cashin closed the book. Power matters more than principle, even among immortals. Perhaps especially among immortals. When you have centuries to accumulate wealth and influence, corruption becomes systematic. Elena absorbed this, troubled. Then how do you resist it? How do you stay yourself? He was quiet for a long moment, his silver eyes distant. I remember what I was before. A physician, actually. In my mortal life, I studied at universities, learned to heal rather than harm. When I was turned against my will, I should note I carried that forward. I tried to use immortality to continue helping rather than destroying. Is that why you stopped feeding? Because healing and harming felt contradictory? Partly. He stood and moved to the window, though the curtains remained drawn. But mostly because I couldn't trust myself. Every time I fed, I felt the hunger grow, felt my humanity slipping. It was easier to starve than to fight that battle constantly. Elena joined him at the window. What changed? Why agree to feed now? You. He looked at her, and the honesty in his gaze made her breath catch. You offered freely, knowing the risk. You trusted me when I didn't trust myself. That kind of faith. He trailed off, struggling with words. It's a rare gift, Elena, one I don't take lightly. Will you need to feed again soon? Eventually. The blood magic consumes power quickly. His jaw tightened. But I'll find another way. I won't ask this of you again. What if I offer? No, the word came out sharp. Absolutely not. Why? Elena challenged. Because you don't trust yourself? Or because you're afraid of what it means? If this becomes regular? Cashin's expression shifted, caught between fear and something deeper. Both. If I feed from you repeatedly, a true blood bond will form. You'll be able to sense my emotions, my location. I'll be able to call you to me, influence your thoughts. The boundary between us will blur until what? Until we can't tell where one ends and the other begins. Elena's heart raced, but she held his gaze. Would that be so terrible? Yes. His voice roughened. Because you'll lose yourself in it. You'll become an extension of me rather than your own person. I've seen it happen, Elena. Blood bonds destroy human autonomy. I won't do that to you. Even if I choose it? You can't choose what you don't understand. Elena stepped closer, frustrated. Then help me understand. Show me. Teach me what I'm agreeing to before I agree to it. Cashin stared at her, warring with himself. Finally, he lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. May I? He asked quietly. Elena nodded. His cool fingers touched her temple, feather light. Blood bonds create pathways. Right now, because you've given blood once, there's a thread between us. Faint, barely noticeable. But if I fed again, the thread would strengthen. You'd begin to feel what I feel. As he spoke, Elena became aware of something she hadn't noticed before, a presence at the edge of her consciousness. Not intrusive, but there. Like sensing someone in the next room without seeing them. That's you, she breathed. Yes, you're feeling my proximity, my awareness of you. His thumb traced her cheekbone. If the bond deepened, you'd feel more. My hunger, my anger, my fear. And eventually, he hesitated. Eventually what? My desire. The words came out raw. You'd feel how much I want you, Elena. How much I've wanted you since you first tended my wounds. How difficult it is to maintain this distance when every instinct screams at me to close it. Elena's pulse thundered. Cashin, that's why I won't feed again. He dropped his hand, stepping back. Because a blood bond wouldn't just connect us, it would give me power over you. And I refuse to use desire as a chain. What if the desire is mutual? He went very still. Elena, I'm not blind, Cashin. I see how you look at me. How you position yourself between me and every danger. How you've given me your chambers, your protection, your secrets. She moved closer despite his retreat. And I feel it too. This pull, this wanting. You're confusing gratitude with attraction, don't. She cut him off sharply. Don't diminish what I'm feeling. I know the difference between gratitude and this. This is impossible. So was surviving House Mordain's attack. So was trusting a vampire not to kill me. We've done impossible before. Cashin looked at her with such longing it hurt. You deserve better than a monster who drinks blood to survive, and you deserve better than eternal loneliness because you're too afraid to let anyone close. They stood facing each other, the space between them charged with everything unspoken. Outside, night deepened. Somewhere in the castle, servants moved through their routines. The world continued, oblivious to the moment breaking open between vampire and mortal. If we do this, Cashin said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, if we explore this connection, I need your promise. What promise? That you'll tell me immediately if the bond becomes too much. If you feel yourself losing autonomy, if I ever overstep, if you need freedom, you'll say so. His eyes blazed. I won't become the monster who steals your choices, Elena. Not even through love. Her heart stuttered at that final word. Is that what this is? I don't know what else to call it. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face, but not touching. I'm 300 years old, and I've never felt anything like this. It terrifies me. Elena closed the distance, pressing her cheek into his palm. Then let's be terrified together. Chapter 10. Dawn's Promiseth attack came at midnight, when the castle's guard was thinnest. Elena woke to the sound of shattering glass and Cashin's hand covering her mouth. His silver eyes blazed urgent in the darkness. Mordain, he whispered. Stay behind me. They'd been expecting this, the retaliation, the final confrontation. But expecting and experiencing were vastly different things. Cashin moved to the door, listening. Beyond it, chaos erupted. Screams, the clash of steel, the inhuman snarls of vampires in combat. They brought their entire force, Cashin said grimly. 20, maybe 30 vampires. They mean to end this tonight. Elena's mind raced. Your household is fighting, but we're outnumbered. He turned to her, and the vulnerability in his face stole her breath. I need to ask something of you. Something unfair and dangerous. Anything. Feed me, his voice cracked. Not just a taste of true feeding. Enough to fully awaken the blood magic, to give me the power to protect everyone. He caught her hands. But it will complete the bond between us. There'll be no severing it afterward. You'll be tied to me, to this house, for as long as you live. Elena's heart pounded, but her answer came without hesitation. Then we'd better survive this so I can yell at you properly later for being dramatic. Despite everything, he almost smiled. You understand what you're agreeing to. I understand that people are dying and you need strength. I understand that. I trust you. She tilted her head, exposing her throat. And I understand that some bonds are worth forging, even if they're permanent. Cashin's eyes darkened with hunger and something deeper, gratitude, wonder, fear all tangled together. You're extraordinary, you know that? Tell me again when we're not about to die. He pulled her close, one hand cradling her head, the other supporting her back. This will feel different, more intense. Stay with me, Elena. Don't let go. His fangs pierced her throat. The sensation flooded her, not just warmth this time, but connection. She felt Cashin's ancient hunger finally, truly satisfied. Felt his power surging, the shadows in the room, responding to his call. Felt his emotions crash through her, fierce protectiveness, desperate hope, and underneath it all, love so profound it threatened to overwhelm her. I've got you. His voice whispered in her mind, though his mouth remained at her throat. I'll always have you. When he pulled away, his eyes blazed like molten silver. The shadows in the room had become a living thing, writhing and coiling around him like a cloak. He looked like something from ancient myths, beautiful, terrible, and utterly unstoppable. Stay here, he commanded. The shadows will protect you. Cashin, he kissed her. Quick, fierce, desperate. Survive this, please. Then he was gone, moving with inhuman speed into the chaos beyond. Elena stood alone for 3 heartbeats, feeling the bond pulse between them. She sensed his fury, his determination, his fear for his people, sensed the battle raging through the castle, like a living storm, and she knew with absolute certainty that staying here meant watching him die through their bond, while she remained safe and useless. No, she grabbed the silver knife from the drawer, the same one she'd used before, and followed. The corridor was a nightmare. Bodies everywhere, both vampire and human. Blood painted the walls. House Mordain's forces had overwhelmed the defenses, pushing deep into the castle's heart, but the shadows were pushing back. They moved like a tide of darkness, responding to Cashin's will. Elena felt his control through the bond, precise, focused, using the shadows not for cruelty but for efficiency. Disabling rather than destroying when possible. Protecting the innocent with the same ferocity, he attacked the guilty. She found him in the Great Hall, surrounded by a dozen Mordain vampires. He was magnificent, a blur of shadow and silver, cutting through attackers with centuries of skill. But even empowered, even awakened, he was outnumbered, and then she felt it through the bond. Lord Mordain himself had arrived. He entered through the shattered doors like death incarnate, ancient, powerful, radiating menace. Where Cashin carried his centuries with weariness, Mordain wore them like a crown. This was a vampire who'd embraced monstrosity completely. Thorn. Mordain's voice boomed. Your parlor tricks won't save you. Surrender now, and I'll make your death quick. Cashin's shadows coiled tighter, but Elena felt his exhaustion bleeding through the bond. Even with her blood strengthening him, he couldn't sustain this against Mordain's full power, unless Elena remembered what Cashin had said. Blood given willingly carries trust, hope, humanity. She stepped into the hall, knife raised, and cut her palm. Blood welled, dark and red. Cashin, she called. Finish it. Through their bond, she pushed everything she felt, her trust, her determination, her absolute refusal to let him face this alone. Pushed the strength of her mortality, her human will, everything that made her herself. The blood bond flared like a star igniting. Cashin's eyes found hers across the chaos, and understanding flooded between them. He extended his hand, and the shadows surged not from the castle, but from Elena herself, from the bond between them, from the space where mortal determination met immortal power. The shadows became something new, not cold and terrifying, but warm and absolute. They swept through the hall like a cleansing tide, and every Mordain vampire they touched simply stopped. Frozen, held by power that was both shadow and light, death and life, vampire and human intertwined. Lord Mordain stared in shock as the shadows wrapped around him. Impossible. Blood magic doesn't work this way. It does, Cashin said quietly, moving to stand beside Elena. When it's built on partnership rather than domination. When a vampire chooses humanity over monstrosity. When a mortal chooses courage over survival. He took Elena's bleeding hand in his, their blood mingling. The bond between them solidified, completely unbreakable. Eternal, perfect. House Nocturne, Cashin declared, his voice resonating with absolute authority, was founded on a simple principle, that power exists to protect, not to prey. You've forgotten that, Mordain. Let me remind you. The shadows tightened. When they released, the Mordain vampires fled. Those who could still move. Lord Mordain himself staggered backward, something like fear finally cracking his ancient confidence. This isn't over, Thorn, he snarled. Yes, Cashin said simply. It is. Tell the other houses what you saw here tonight. Tell them House Nocturne has remembered its strength. And tell them we won't tolerate aggression again. Mordain vanished into the night, his forces scattering after him. Silence fell over the battered castle. Cashin turned to Elena, still holding her bleeding hand. You shouldn't have come. You could have died. So could you. She swayed, exhausted. Besides, someone has to keep you from being dramatically self-sacrificing. He caught her as her knees buckled, lifting her easily. You're impossible. You've mentioned that before. I'll mention it again every day for the rest of your life. He carried her toward his chambers, his steps steady despite the carnage around them, which, thanks to the blood bond, will be considerably longer than a normal human lifespan. Hope you're prepared for that. Elena's eyes widened. Wait. What details later? Rest now. His voice softened. You saved us, Elena, all of us, by being exactly who you are. She wanted to argue, to demand explanations about extended lifespans and blood bond consequences. But exhaustion pulled at her, and she felt safe in his arms, felt the bond between them humming with contentment, with relief, with love. Neither had to speak aloud. Cashin? She murmured, as sleep claimed her. Yes, you're mine now too, you know. The bond works both ways. She felt his smile against her hair. I know. I'm counting on it. Dawn approached, the first dawn of their new existence. Not vampire, not mortal, but something in between. Something forged in blood and trust and impossible choices. Something worth fighting for, always.